In the scorching heat of a Nevada afternoon, the streets of Red Hollow were eerily quiet. Sheriff Diane Harris was on her usual patrol, her cruiser winding through the empty roads of the small desert town. She had just stopped by her house to check on her 12-year-old daughter, Emily, after a phone call from another mother raised concerns. What happened next sent shockwaves through the town. 7 shots, deliberate, relentless. When police arrived at the Harris home, they found Diane standing in the living room, her service weapon sitting calmly on the coffee table. Her husband, Thomas Harris, lay lifeless on the floor in his office, 7 bullets in his chest. But the scene was more unsettling than that. Diane had shot him. When the police arrived and arrested her, she said nothing except, in a voice cold and unwavering, "He deserved it." Emily, her 12-year-old daughter, was huddled in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. The officers, her own mother's deputies, were left in shock as they slowly entered the house. They didn't know what to make of the scene unfolding before them. Diane Harris had always been a symbol of law and order in Red Hollow, strong, dependable, and trusted by everyone. But now, she was standing there in handcuffs, escorted out of her own home while her daughter's desperate cries echoed in the background. The questions began almost immediately. Why would a sheriff, sworn to protect and serve, gun down her own husband in cold blood? What could possibly drive a woman like her to commit such an act? And why was she saying nothing more than those chilling words? He deserved it. At first, the town assumed it was a domestic dispute, maybe an argument gone too far. But the more investigators dug, the more they began to see that this wasn't just a moment of rage. Diane wasn't the type to lose control. Emily held the key to the truth, but she was too traumatized to speak. Whatever had been going on behind the walls of the Harris household, it was clear that it had taken a toll. The scars ran deep. Why did a respected sheriff unload 7 bullets into the man she had once promised to love and protect? What had happened behind those doors that Diane was willing to risk everything to bring to an end? Everyone is talking about this story. What's stopping you? Share it now and stay with us as we uncover. Diane Harris wasn't just the sheriff of Red Hollow. She was its backbone. At 43, she had devoted her life to protecting the town she loved. A small desert community where every face was familiar, Diane was more than a law enforcer. She was a symbol of strength and security. Known for her unwavering commitment to justice and no-nonsense attitude, she had earned the trust of her neighbors and the respect of her peers. But the woman Red Hollow looked up to wasn't shaped by an easy life. Diane's rise to power was hard-won, built on a foundation of grit and determination. Born and raised in the stark Nevada desert, Diane learned early on that survival wasn't guaranteed. At just 12 years old, she lost her mother to domestic violence, a tragedy that would shape the course of her life forever. Her mother had been a hard-working woman, trying to make a life for herself and her children. But the man she married was anything but a provider. Diane's mother, trapped in an abusive relationship, had been caught in a cycle she couldn't escape. When Diane's mother died, it was the result of a violent confrontation, a loss that left young Diane scarred and angry. It wasn't just the death of her mother. It was the helplessness of seeing a woman who loved her children, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. That was the moment Diane swore to herself she would never let someone suffer like that again. It wasn't just about justice. It was about ensuring that no one, especially women and children, would ever feel that same powerlessness. The experience ignited a fire in her, a desire to protect the innocent and fight against the injustice she had witnessed firsthand. Diane's path into law enforcement was driven by that same fierce resolve. She joined the police force at 22, starting at the bottom and working her way up. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth achieving ever was. Her toughness and refusal to back down earned her the reputation of someone who could be trusted to get the job done, no matter the cost. By the time Diane met Michael Harris, a kind and well-liked schoolteacher, she had already established herself as the go-to person in Red Hollow for tough cases and tough decisions. Their marriage, built on mutual respect and love, seemed like the perfect balance. Michael was the calm to her storm, the gentle presence she needed. To the citizens of Red Hollow, Diane Harris was the epitome of law and order, a symbol of everything that was right. But what they didn't know was that beneath that strong exterior was a woman haunted by a past she couldn't fully escape. A past that would one day lead her to make a decision that would change everything. For years, Diane and Michael Harris had seemed like the perfect couple. From the outside, they were the epitome of love and stability. Two people from different worlds, brought together by fate, building a blended family that seemed unbreakable. But on one fateful afternoon, Diane would walk into a nightmare that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her marriage, about herself, and about the man she had trusted with her heart. It all started as a normal patrol day, but Diane's instincts had been nagging at her. While on her rounds, she received a call that would change everything. Emily, her 12-year-old daughter, was supposed to be spending the afternoon at a friend's house. But the friend's mother had called to say she hadn't seen Emily all day. Something about the conversation didn't sit right, and Diane's concern deepened. She wasn't scheduled to check in, but something told her to go home. Something was off. Diane made the decision to cut her patrol short and head straight to the house. As she approached her front door, the silence felt different. Too quiet. The house had always been a place of comfort, but today it felt empty in a way that made her skin crawl. There was no sign of Emily, no sounds of the usual chatter, no evidence of the excitement the girl should have had for the event she was supposed to be attending. Diane's gut twisted. She didn't know why, but she needed to check her daughter's whereabouts. When she passed Michael's office door, her heart skipped a beat. It was locked. The door, which was always left slightly ajar, was now shut tight. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, her pulse racing. Something inside her, some instinct, told her to open it. With trembling hands, she turned the handle. The moment she stepped into the room, her world shattered. There, in the dimly lit office, was Michael, the man she had married, the man she trusted. But it wasn't just him. In the corner of the room stood Emily, her face pale with fear, eyes wide in terror. And Michael, her husband, her partner, was standing too close, his hands placed where they should never be. The scene was a brutal contradiction to everything Diane had believed about their family. Rage, confusion, and heartbreak flooded her all at once. The woman who had fought her way up the ranks of law enforcement, who had always kept a level head in the face of danger, was now overcome with an emotion she hadn't expected. Fury. Pure, searing fury. At that moment, something inside her snapped. No longer just the sheriff, Diane was a mother. A mother who would do anything to protect her child. Without thinking, without fully processing the extent of what she had just seen, Diane's hand tightened on the weapon she always carried. She didn't question it. She didn't hesitate. 7 shots rang out in the house, each one louder than the last, echoing through the walls like a death sentence. Diane didn't stop until the gun was empty. It wasn't until the smoke cleared that Diane finally came to her senses. Her breathing was ragged, her eyes locked on the man she once loved, now lying motionless on the floor. But at that moment, as the deputies arrived at the scene, the real question began to form. Is this enough reason for an officer of the law to shoot 7 bullets? Or is it enough for a mother to do whatever it takes to protect her child? The Harris home, once a place of safety and love, was now a crime scene. Police cruisers lined the street, their lights flashing in sharp contrast to the quiet desert sky. Yellow crime scene tapes stretched across the front yard, barring curious neighbors from getting too close. Inside, detectives moved methodically, documenting the aftermath of a moment that had left an entire town stunned. For years, Diane Harris had been on the other side of scenes like this, guiding her deputies, piecing together evidence, uncovering truths that others couldn't. But now she was the suspect, and despite her years of experience, nothing could have prepared her for what came next. From the moment her colleagues arrived at her home, Diane had been calm, almost eerily so. She didn't deny what she had done. She didn't offer excuses or plead her case. Instead, she handed over her weapon, her voice steady and cold as she uttered the words that would echo in the minds of everyone who heard them. He deserved it. The confession was only the beginning. As investigators dug deeper into what had unfolded in the Harris household, they began to uncover a story far darker than anyone had imagined. It started with Emily, Diane's 12-year-old daughter, who was still trembling when officers found her huddled in the corner of the living room. Emily's initial silence spoke volumes, her tears a damning testament to the horrors she had endured. When detectives finally coaxed her into speaking, her words were like a flood breaking through a dam. Emily described years of manipulation and abuse at the hands of her father, acts so calculated and cruel they left seasoned investigators shaken. Michael Harris, the well-liked teacher and devoted family man, had been hiding a monstrous side. He had preyed on the trust of those who loved him most, using his role as father to control and harm. The interviews were just the beginning. Medical tests conducted in the aftermath revealed chilling evidence that corroborated Emily's claims, painting a picture of systematic abuse that had gone unchecked for years. The results left no room for doubt. Emily's anger, her fear, her rebellion, they were all born from the trauma she had been forced to endure in silence. For the investigators, the revelations were like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. The strange shifts in Emily's behavior, her outbursts at school, her reluctance to be left alone with her father, it all made sense now. But for Diane, the truth was like a blade twisting in her heart. She had missed the signs. She had trusted the man who was supposed to protect their daughter. And when the truth finally came to light, she hadn't hesitated to act. As the pieces of the story fell into place, one question loomed larger than any other. Was Diane justified in taking the law into her own hands? To her, pulling the trigger had been an act of protection, a mother's instinct to shield her child at all costs. But to the law, it was something far more complicated. Was this the desperate act of a mother pushed to her breaking point? Or had Diane made a calculated decision, one born not just of fury, but of revenge? The truth about Michael Harris was out in the open. But Diane's actions would soon be put under the same unforgiving spotlight. The truth about Michael Harris was coming to light. But was Diane justified in taking the law into her own hands? Or was this a calculated act of revenge? The trial of Diane Harris was more than just a legal battle. It was a spectacle that held the nation in its grip. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, hungry for every detail. Inside, the courtroom brimmed with tension, every seat filled, as people debated the same haunting question. Was Diane Harris a hero, a mother pushed to protect her child, or a murderer who had let her rage take over? The prosecution wasted no time painting Diane in a harsh light. To them, this wasn't a story of heroism but of premeditated violence. They pointed to the 7 bullets, the deliberate nature of each shot, as evidence that Diane hadn't acted out of fear but out of fury. The lead prosecutor described her as a seasoned law enforcement officer who knew better than to take justice into her own hands. They argued that she could have called for backup, followed protocol, but instead, she had let emotion dictate her actions. But if the prosecution's case was cold and clinical, the defense brought the raw, human side of the story to the forefront. They argued that Diane was not just a sheriff that day, she was a mother who had walked into her home and found the unthinkable. They described the betrayal she must have felt, the horror of seeing her husband, a man she trusted completely, violating that trust in the most despicable way. They claimed that Diane's actions weren't about revenge, but about protecting Emily, about ensuring her daughter would never suffer again. The testimonies that followed were gut-wrenching. Emily, now composed but visibly scarred, took the stand and described years of abuse at the hands of her father. Her voice trembled as she recounted the manipulation, the fear, the moments of terror that had shaped her childhood. The courtroom was silent, every word hitting like a hammer. Her bravery in sharing her story left many in tears, but it also added weight to the defense's argument. Then came Diane's turn to testify. Her usual stoic demeanor cracked as she recounted the events of that fateful afternoon. She described the locked office door, the muffled sounds, and the moment she flung it open to find Michael and Emily. Her voice broke as she told the court about the look on her daughter's face. Fear, shame, and a plea for help. She described the split second where every instinct as a mother overtook her training as an officer, where the badge didn't matter, only Emily's safety did. "He betrayed us all," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I didn't see a man I loved standing there. I saw a threat to my child. And I did what I had to do." The courtroom listened, rapt, as Diane described pulling the trigger. 7 times. She didn't shy away from it, didn't try to justify the number of bullets or soften her actions. "I would do it again," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. Because Emily deserved to be safe. Both sides made their closing arguments, the prosecution hammering home the idea that law cannot be dictated by emotion, and the defense reminding the jury that this wasn't just about the law, it was about a mother's primal need to protect her child. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury deliberated. Hours felt like days as everyone waited, their eyes darting between the clock and the closed doors. And when the jury finally returned, the room fell deathly silent. Diane Harris sat stoically, her hands folded in her lap, as the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict. The fate of a mother who had sacrificed everything to protect her child now rested in the hands of 12 strangers. And as the foreperson began to speak, the entire room leaned forward, holding their breath. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent. The fate of Diane Harris hung in the balance. The jury had spoken. After hours of deliberation and weeks of heart-wrenching testimony, the verdict was in guilty of second-degree murder. Diane Harris, the once revered sheriff of Red Hollow, now faced a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. As the words were read aloud, the courtroom seemed to freeze, a collective breath held in the aftermath of a decision that would ripple far beyond those 4 walls. Diane's reaction was as composed as ever. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply nodded, her expression one of quiet resignation. To the onlookers, it was the same unshakable strength they had always known her for, though now tinged with an air of finality. For Diane, this was the price she had accepted the moment she squeezed the trigger. She had made her choice, and she would carry the weight of it, whatever the cost. Emily, sitting in the gallery, clung tightly to her aunt, her face wet with tears. But these weren't just tears of grief or loss. For the first time in years, Emily felt something she hadn't known in what seemed like a lifetime: freedom. In a quiet but powerful statement to the court, she had spoken of her gratitude to her mother. "She saved me," Emily had said, her voice cracking but resolute. "No one else saw what was happening to me, but she did, and she stopped it. I'll never forget that." Outside the courthouse, the town of Red Hollow and the world beyond was split. Some saw Diane as a hero, a mother who had done what any parent would in her place. They praised her for her bravery, for her willingness to sacrifice everything to protect her child. Signs reading, "Free Diane Harris," dotted front yards, and petitions circulated demanding her release. But not everyone agreed. To others, Diane was a criminal, someone who had stepped outside the bounds of the law she had sworn to uphold. They argued that no matter the circumstances, justice must follow due process, and Diane's actions had undermined that principle. Heated debates erupted in living rooms, on social media, and in the press, each side fiercely defending their view of what justice truly meant. For Emily, however, the debate didn't matter. What mattered was that she could finally sleep without fear, that she could walk through her home without the shadow of her father looming over her. And while she missed her mother desperately, she carried with her the knowledge that Diane's actions had given her a second chance at life. In the years that followed, Diane's story became more than just a headline. It became a symbol, a reflection of the impossible choices people make when the systems meant to protect them fail. It forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about abuse, about justice, and about the lengths one will go to protect the ones they love. Sitting in her prison cell, Diane Harris didn't ask for pity or forgiveness. She didn't seek validation for what she had done. For her, the courtroom's verdict wasn't the one that mattered. The only verdict she cared about was Emily's, and in her daughter's eyes, she had done what was right. The story of Diane Harris isn't one of simple heroes and villains. It's a story about the human capacity to endure, to fight, and to protect no matter the cost. And for the people of Red Hollow, it's a story they will never forget. In the end, Diane Harris may have been judged guilty in a court of law, but to many, she will always be a mother who chose her child's safety above all else. And while the debate over her actions rages on, one thing is certain. The scars left by this tragedy will linger long after the courtroom doors have closed. As the sun sets over the Nevada desert, its warm hues fade into the cool darkness of night, a reminder that even the clearest skies can hold shadows. Diane Harris's story isn't just one of a mother, a sheriff, or a small town shattered by tragedy. It's a story that forces us to confront a question as old as justice itself. When the system meant to protect us fails, is it ever acceptable to take matters into your own hands? Diane's actions have been debated in courtrooms, living rooms, and across the world. To some, she's a mother who made an impossible choice. To others, she crossed a line that no one, not even a sheriff, has the right to cross. But ultimately, the question remains, what would you have done if you were in her position? The answers aren't simple, and maybe they never will be. But stories like this remind us of the fine line between justice and vengeance, between heroism and guilt. And as we wrestle with these questions, Diane Harris's name will remain a symbol of the complex, fragile nature of the choices we make when pushed to the brink. If this story gripped you, if it made you think or feel something you can't quite put into words, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. And join us next time as we delve into another case that will challenge everything you think you know about justice, humanity, and the choices that define us.